Welcome to 2030 and Beyond with me, Sandi Adams. I'm here today in beautiful Camelot Castle, and that might give you a clue as to who I'm going to be speaking to, because I'm so excited about this guest today. It's Mr. John Mappin. Thank you, John, for joining me today.
Well, thank you, Sandi. It's an absolute pleasure.
Bless you.
To have you here, and welcome.
I didn't first hear it. I've heard about you for a long time because you've got this beautiful place, and you're very involved in politics and all sorts of things. But when I realised that you'd turned down this place from being a migrant hotel, because you got a huge offer of money, didn't you, to abandon all your staff, which keeps the whole economy running in this area, and to just, to turn it down was a big thing, wasn't it? What did you feel at the time?
Well, it was nearly 4 years ago now. And funnily enough, the other day, I came across the email, you're going through your computer emails, and I came across the initial approach. And I remember the day I received it, and it was essentially an offer to essentially turn Camelot Castle, as you've seen it here today, into a sort of a migrant processing centre, which is essentially a hotel where they put up migrants, legal and in some cases illegal, where they stay. And I just, frankly, when I got the initial email, I thought it was a joke. I thought this absolutely beggars the belief. And I then called up, funnily enough, Nigel Farage, who is a close family friend. And I said, Nigel, you are absolutely not going to believe this. He said, well, actually, I would, because there's 350 other hotels have received the same offer. I said, well, I'm going to turn it down. And I said, what's more, I'm going to turn it down publicly because I think that the idea of putting up migrants in four-poster beds at Camelot Castle is actually going to sort of stick in the craw of the average English person,
absolutely,
the average British person. And so we went for it. And one thing led to another. Then I get a call from Tucker Carlson over in the United States. Yeah. And he calls me up and he goes, John, I've just heard about this remarkable situation. Would you mind coming on Fox News? So I ended up going on Fox News. I did one of Tucker's last shows on Fox. And of course, when I look at it now, of course, it would have been a lot of money. I mean, we're probably talking, these things roll on for about 4 years into it. Now they've still got migrants in hotels. So I suspect it would have been a sort of a 10-year thing. So we're probably talking about £20 million, which of course is generational wealth. But
yes.
You have to compare that to, let's say you are a mother with a child that lives in Tintagel and you would like your daughter, age 9 or 10, to walk to school. And you know that up the road there's a migrant processing centre, and you've heard that in Newquay, where they also have these migrant processing centres, there have been some assaults. And, the village life here would have changed utterly. And of course, the ironic thing is these hotels, as they set them up, they have security to keep the public out, but they don't have security to keep the
migrants in.
The migrants in. And so what happens is you get a leakage, and it's apparently quite a steady leakage of migrants into the community. And I'm not saying that all of these people are bad. And actually, I think British people, we have a tremendous track record of being kind to people. If you remember at the end of the last war.
Absolutely. The integration has been very, very, the integration has been very good. I brought my children up in southeast London, and there were people there who had been integrated slowly over a good period of time, and they worked hard, and it was a very good system and the
Well, frankly, some of the wealthiest families in England now have made their wealth as a result of coming to this country as migrants, and they have contributed marvellously. I have here many where you've met some of my Polish staff.
Yeah, wonderful.
And they, funnily enough, they were more furious than anybody because they said, well, actually, we've come here legally.
Yeah.
We have worked hard. We have paid our taxes. We waited for whatever it is, the 4 years' time. They're now proud British tax-paying citizens. And funnily enough, they were more furious than my manager here, Mark. If you get a chance, you should interview him because he was absolutely hopping mad.
Not surprised, yeah.
And but a number of people did pick up on it. And I think it made a big difference because the story went viral. I think it was even reported in China, it was reported in Russia, it was reported all over America, South America, you know, because Camelot Castle is a global icon. It is known, the story of King Arthur. And I think the idea of, you know, I mean, some of the things, I'm not going to get into it, because I really don't want to, you know, I appreciate all different religions. I appreciate all different people. And my purpose in this was not to stir it up.
No.
I believe in unifying people. But I do think it was a turning point for the country because the number of phone calls we had. I had a woman from America, from just outside Chicago, an old woman. She sent me £1,000.
Oh, bless her.
And she said, listen, you've turned the government's money down. You know, here's my, well, it was $1,000 actually. Here's my $1,000. She said, I'm too old to come, but please, you know, let somebody stay there that can't come. And I would like to pay for them to stay there and, you know, sell them a hotel room if you like, or, you know, use that for the cost of the hotel room.
Pass it on.
Of course, I called her and I insisted on sending it back. She said, no. Oh. I said, really, we're totally fine. She said, no, I insist. Just let some other people stay there that would like to stay. So it was a marvellous, it brought people together, actually. It unified the village here in a way that is extraordinary. And so much good has come out of it. And I think the reason I did decide to speak up about it and why I respect what you've done, Sandi, is because we are at a point in life where if we don't use our voices, we are going to lose our voices. And we're going to lose our country.
100%.
You know, so...
And that's why we're sitting here having this conversation, because, you know, the more that we can raise awareness about, we're literally at a critical point, aren't we? I mean, do you want to talk a bit more about that?
I think we're past, we are at a turning point, and I think we've reached a point where the factors that have infiltrated our society in order to destroy it have shown themselves very, very clearly. And the general public is not just worried, they're not just sad, they are angry. And in fact, some of them are actually furious. And it's actually, I don't know if you feel this, but I feel that it's a bit of a tinderbox.
Oh, absolutely.
And unless we put people in charge who actually are going to address the problems as even the average person here. I mean, you know, I always say to people, Camelot Castle is not, you know, this is not the Ritz-on-Sea. This is a bog standard. Anybody can stay here for a relatively reasonable amount of money.
It's an amazing place.
This is not one of these swanky hotels in Saint-Tropez.
Thank goodness.
Well, thank goodness, yes, exactly. But the people that come here are just very, very down-to-earth, what I would call bellwether British men and women and children. And I hear what they're saying and what they talk about in the bar, and they are not happy. They are not happy with the situation. So I do think that the next moves that this country makes politically are very important. You very kindly said that I'm involved in a lot politically. It's only really by default. It's only really because I have seen things going on. I thought, well, I'd better say something about that. And of course, you know, I get bored in the evenings and I get going on Twitter.
Why not? It's better than watching
Yeah.
TV, isn't it?
Well,
Because at the end of the day, there's nothing truthful
But
there.
have you noticed, actually, the films coming out of Hollywood now? I used to live in Hollywood. I lived in Hollywood for 6 years.
Really?
I watched every single film that got made. In fact, I had a job watching movies to decide what films we were going to buy to distribute. It was the best job in the world.
Did you?
I did, yeah, for the same company that made Last Emperor and Terminator.
Really?
Yeah. So I was working in Hollywood,
Yeah.
looking at films. My job was literally to watch like 4 or 5 films a day. It was just brilliant.
Fantastic.
So I was fascinated by films. Is it just me, or is the stuff that comes out of Hollywood virtually unwatchable?
It's awful. It's absolutely awful.
I'm not
trying to recall
sort of,
something.
It's not
You're
me
right.
that is sort of becoming sort of senile or something.
No.
I don't think so.
No, you're not going senile. I mean, it seems to me there's a darkness there. There's definitely a darkness, as there seems to be everywhere at the moment. You know, not everywhere, but certainly there's a lot of dark things going on. When we've got the Epstein files and the dark, the Hollywood movies, things like, you know, I think it started with. You know, what was that Kubrick film that was very demonic?
Eyes Wide Shut.
Eyes Wide Shut. And it's got kind of slowly worse since then. And I think now it's at that point where the reality and the fiction seems to be sort of somehow not, you know, you can't tell the difference. And it's a bit like the truth and the lies, where we're just at this point where we are completely confused as to what is reality and what isn't, because everything has become so bizarre. I mean, so strange in our world. And I feel sorry for people because, particularly young people, they must be very confused at the moment.
I think what's happened is what we initially thought was a fictional film, such as Eyes Wide Shut. I think we now realise that there was probably a lot more truth in that than people imagine. And of course, sadly, the victims of Epstein are now coming forward, and we are hearing the most ghastly stories about that, which is terrible. And I have to say that as horrible as it is, and as horrible as some of the practices are that clearly have been going on, I think the general public has to look, and they have to take a look at what truly has been going on, because really where we go wrong, I think, as a society, is we have what I would call a sort of a sweetness and light view of the world, and people's confront of actual evil is not as high as it needs to be in order to actually confront it. If you can't get to the root cause of a problem, then one has difficulty. But going back to why this place is significant, when I was working in Hollywood, obviously Hollywood itself is a myth factory. And that's what they do all day, whether they're producing the myth of James Bond or Harry Potter. They are actually manufacturing archetypes.
Yeah.
And because I was interested in film marketing and how stories carry, why is it that, you know, one film will do great at the box office and another film will completely flop? Because if you're buying films, then you need to better work out why one film works and the other film doesn't. Or you try to anyway. I realized that the archetypes and the myths of this world have an extraordinary job to do. They have actually a role in society. And I started to analyze, well, which myth is the most important myth, other than obviously the religious archetypes. So putting the religious stories to one side, which would be the story of Jesus Christ, the story of Muhammad, the story of Buddha, putting those to one side, and you get into secular or non-religious archetypes. What I worked out actually in Hollywood was that the story of King Arthur was, oddly, the prime myth. And how did I arrive at that? Well, it turns out that that story is the story that the bean counters in Hollywood put more beans into than any other
Right, yes.
story year in, year out.
Yeah.
Well, if you're a Hollywood bean counter, generally you want to yield on your beans. You want to put some beans in. You want to get more beans back than you put in when you make, you're in entertainment production or news production or whatever you call this. You want to get a yield. So you want to do something whereby you're going to invest your time, your money, your energy. And so clearly the myth that got or was being told more often, still this is true to this day, more than any other story, whether it's the story of Arthur, the story of Merlin, the story of the Knights of the Round Table. I mean, actually, Ava Gardner stayed here and they filmed Knights of the Round Table here.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, she stayed in room 103. I don't know what your room you're in, but
No, it's not my room.
not your room anyway. Well, we should organise that. But Ava Gardner was here and Laurence Olivier was here. And he wasn't filming a story about the Knights of the Round Table, funny enough. He was filming Dracula here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it was the one with Donald Pleasance in it. And actually, this was the loony bin.
Oh, goodness. I remember that film.
Yeah.
He was very creepy, Donald Pleasance, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. It's a great Dracula version. Funny enough, on Halloween, we do a screening of it here.
Got to come.
We put a big sheet up in the Great Hall and sort of screen this old black and white.
Wonderful.
And there's a great story, actually, where Laurence Olivier used to love port.
He did. I worked with him at the Old Vic, funnily enough.
Did you really?
Yes.
Well, anyway, he insisted, and the hotel didn't have any port. And somebody said, well, there's a pub down in Boscastle. Let's go down there to see if they've got some port. Anyway, so Laurence Olivier arrives down at this pub in Boscastle, gets the hold of the barman and says, listen, I'm sure you've got a very good port here. And the barman, being good Cornish style, said, well, of course I do. But she didn't at all. So he went in the back, got an old bottle of wine, tipped it into a flask, put some sugar in there, a little bit of sherry, swizzed it all around, and brought it out and presented it as this sort of fine port. And, everybody was sort of waiting for Laurence Olivier to taste it. He said, that's the finest port I've ever tried.
It wasn't port.
Of course, he went back there every night until the bottle was finished.
That's a lovely story.
So it's there all sorts of people have been here, and what I realised was that the prime myth obviously attracts larger than life characters, and the retelling of that story. Funnily enough, we dug deeper into it and we looked. Well, why is it that the story of Arthur is prime? And at its heart, it contains the idea of the search for the Grail, which essentially is truth-seeking.
Yeah.
And so this is why this was the sort of my interest, really, is I'm a bit of a truth seeker.
Absolutely.
And I like to...
Thank goodness you are.
Yeah, well, we like to seek the truth.
Yes.
And what I say is this, is if you seek the truth and you find little bits of it, the games that you can play are more fun when you know which pieces on the chessboard are true and aren't true. If you're in a muddle as to what's true and what's not true and what's speculative and what's not speculative. And so Camelot now has become a sort of a clearinghouse for all sorts of information, some of which, of course, is absolutely ridiculous. And because there's all sorts of people presenting truth out there that isn't truth.
Of course.
And I'm sure you've run into a bit of that
Absolutely.
as well. So
it's
you
like
have to
literally sorting the truth from the falsehood.
Yeah.
It's very difficult sometimes. But
Very difficult.
if you have that inner compass, sometimes you can get there.
Yeah. But also certain tests, does the truth work? Can it be applied? Is it constant from person to person, or is it just one person's truth? But it is a very interesting spot to occupy. And when I came back to England, having lived in Hollywood, I had this idea of creating a place where artists could stay for free, where, we could encourage creativity. And my business partner and I came down here for a walk one day. We had no idea. We'd never been to Tintagel. My business partner got it into his head that he wanted to come here.
Yeah.
And we were down on the beach down there. We've got a lovely beach with sort of Merlin's Cave is down there. You can see all that.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I just looked up and I said, what is that? And I walked in the front door and there was a lovely Cornish gentleman there. And I said, do you know the owners? He said, I might do. I said, do they live around here? He said, they might do. I said, come on, you're the owner, aren't you? He said, well, as a matter of fact, I am. I said, have you ever thought about selling this place? I mean, literally, it's the first thing I said.
Gosh.
He said, it's funny you said, I was just thinking about it today. And I said, so what would you like? He said, well, my mother always told me to undress before I go to bed. I said, meaning what exactly in Cornish? He said, well, I'm going to die. And my children don't want this property. And I don't want them arguing over it. And he told me that Peter de Savary had nearly bought it, and then the deal didn't close. So we sat in the bar, and I said to him, listen, I don't have time for lawyers and bankers and all of this. I said, just be straightforward. Just tell me the raw details. And literally in 15 minutes, he took me through it. I said, you were telling me the truth. He said, of course I'm a mason. And, we're very upstanding people, and he was the chief mason in the village. I said, well, I don't know much about masonry, but I'm sure you are. And he just sounded, when you meet somebody, and it just sounded as if the information, I said, well, listen, if the information you've given me today checks out, we've got a deal. And literally, it was 45 minutes. We walked in here 45 minutes later.
That is extraordinary.
And it was the most extraordinary thing. And we haven't looked back. I mean, I think, to be honest with you, if I'd sat and thought about it, bearing in mind, I'd never run a hotel before. I had no plans to live in Cornwall whatsoever. But I did see that it was the birthplace of King Arthur.
There you are.
And I knew that if you occupy the birthplace of something, to some degree, you can establish some level of coordination or control. Control's the wrong word, but some level of care for the prime myth. Because if you help something,
yes,
and we energized it, we've energized. I think probably 5 other extra King Arthur films got made as a result of us buying it, because we revved up the King Arthur myth so much.
Brilliant, yeah.
And then the Rousing family got very enthusiastic, and they'd heard all about it here, and they donated, 5 million for the bridge, and there's the Tetra Pak people. The
Tetra Pak people, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So I think Princess Anne's husband actually was the one who got revved up about that, and he got them going.
I'm sure a lot of you know about magnesium.
For all your anti-Big Pharma needs, look no further than clivedecarl.com.
I had rheumatoid arthritis so badly I couldn't walk or get dressed.
He sells a fantastic range of top-quality supplements.
Worked out that magnesium dissolves calcium, and I haven't had any arthritic problems in over 40 years.
You've re-energised the
Well, you can
the
breathe.
place,
You can breathe life into a story. You can retell a story in a way that has a modern context. And I think the idea of having a round table of artists. Well, you met John Dalton, who's the harpist.
Yeah.
Who
amazing man.
He's an amazing guy. And I think it was like the first week we were here, John walked in here and he said, well, I'm a harpist. I said, well, lovely. You qualify for stay for free. Everybody said to me, John, you're mad. You're not making any money at all yet. And already you're allowing artists to stay for free here.
Oh, lovely. Yeah.
And, he's been back here many times. And I think Ted then, my business partner, he then said, well, John, I'm going to paint. I said, well, hang on, Ted, I thought you were going to be the manager. He said, no, I'm going to be the painter. So I said to the old manager, the fellow who sold it to me, I said, well, would you mind carrying on managing? He said, well, I never wanted to leave anyway.
Oh, isn't that perfect?
He just grandfathered us in.
Oh, that's lovely.
He did such a good job.
So he's almost like the caretaker.
I think in a way, he said to me one thing. He said, I said, what's giving you the most pleasure about Camelot? He said, my dear, our family has made tens of thousands of people happy here over the years. And they were farmers, they bought it out of bankruptcy. And they were farmers, and they did their best in their way, and they looked after the property. And he used to sit behind the bar at night and tell jokes, and he just used to, and I still have people coming back here today that say, well, how's Pat? And he was a great guy. And it is remarkable when you can't actually own a place like this. I know you can be on the deeds, but you're just a caretaker for the next.
Exactly,
you're a guardian
for the next guardian of it. Yeah.
You're a guardian of it, and now in more ways than one, because of what's actually being achieved here, geopolitically and in many other ways. But Pat said to me, he said, all I want to see is that you continue making people happy here.
Oh, and you obviously have. Yeah.
Well, you have to be the judge of that. You speak to the guests and you see the
I've seen very
atmosphere.
happy people out there because we've been here
I think
all
so.
day.
I think
It's
they
been
are.
lovely,
I think it's very friendly. Our staff here are superb. I mean, they're I just took them all out to lunch actually, which is
That's very nice.
Yeah.
Taking your staff out to lunch.
well, it was such a beautiful spring day.
Yeah.
We went up to Ensley, which is another beautiful hotel near here.
Nice.
And it's just as a way to say thank you, because we've been working very hard over the winter.
Amazing. Now, I've got a few questions for you, which you were talking about the King Arthur myth, legend, whatever you want to call it. I mean, there is a sort of correlation in some ways in the archetype with. I know I've got a reproduction of the round table that's in, I think, Winchester Cathedral on my
the
wall
one
at
here in the
home.
Great Hall.
Oh, I haven't seen that. I'll have a
there
look.
is a reproduction. That is of the Winchester one.
Yeah, I have one in my house, and the archetype is almost the same as Jesus Christ, because the 12 disciples on my one anyway. You've got Jesus, and then you've got King Arthur, and it's 12 disciples, 12 knights of the Round Table. They are going to come back to heal the land, and it's that kind of archetype. Would you agree or would you disagree?
Well, you're actually raising a very, very interesting point, because the King Arthur myth, and this is a little bit of a risque observation, but I think it's true, and if you look into it, you'll find it to be true. Up until the King Arthur period, Britain was essentially pagan. And the pagans worshipped a female god. God, basically, up until Christianity, was female. So essentially, when the Christians came along, God had a sex change, you could say. Which, I'm not sure that God has a sex at all, is my concept, really.
I think that's it, really, isn't it?
But God always was represented. If you go back into Africa, you have these statues of Venus and so on and so forth.
Yes, and
so God,
you've got the goddesses, yes.
Exactly, and the Earth Mother and all of this. And so the idea was that Merlin essentially brokered a peace, because Merlin was pagan. So Merlin brokered a peace between the female energy of this land and the male energy that was coming in from Rome. And so the Round Table was an idea of getting the pagans and the Christians together. And in fact, if you study the sequence in Mallory, I was educated at Winchester College, and actually Winchester owned the Mallory manuscript, which was the original Arthurian manuscript. It was sold when I was at the school, funnily enough. And the story of Arthur starts off with pagan stories and becomes more Christian. And so it was a way of introducing Christian philosophy smoothly to an extant pagan society. And in fact, around here, of course, there's a lot of Christians that live around here, but there's still also a lot of pagans. Cornwall is still quite Celtic.
It is, yes.
And you will find, for instance, a tremendous number of people who are pagans in this country, actually up and down it. It's not uncommon in England at all. But the Arthurian myth is the bridge of that mythology.
Right. Interesting.
And which makes it even more important.
You see, this is why I feel that, certainly with Ireland and England, there seems to be a concerted effort to dismantle it before everything else. I feel that we are being targeted a little bit. Is it because of this deep spiritual heritage that's here, do you think?
Well, the true enemy, of modern society is it's a philosophy that does not believe in any God. It's an atheist philosophy. It's a materialism.
Yeah.
And materialism, dates back a long way. They've always been materialists, but it got a real boost in Leipzig in about 1876. And there was a fellow there called Wundt, who was given the job of coming up with a theory to keep the Prussian army fighting. And he didn't come up with actually an original idea. He nicked one off the Egyptians, oddly. And this was the idea that man is an animal and is purely the sum of his chemical parts. In other words, you are not a spirit occupying that body. You are purely, that body is, you are just a bunch of chemicals. And therefore, if I want to change you, all I really have to do is change your chemicals. Well, that is very convenient for Big Pharma.
Absolutely, yeah.
Very convenient philosophy. So because Leipzig was the epicenter of medical philosophy in the world at that point, that's where you went as a doctor in those days for your final polish as a doctor, right? And it was fantastic for anatomy and so on and so forth. However, the humanities at that point took a hell of a shellacking. And the idea that you are a spirit with a mind, with a body, came under assault. And each of the elements that if you look around the world and you say, okay, who is it that is really trying to destroy the culture currently? The common denominator you will find is somebody who is pushing what has become modern psychology and modern psychiatric philosophy.
Yeah.
And that is really the root of it. You see, originally, of course, psychology comes from the Greek psyche, spirit, ology, study of, like biology is like bio, life.
Exactly, yeah.
Ology, study of life. That would be biology. Psychology should mean the study of the spirit. But in 1876, his definition was altered. And after that point, all the textbooks were altered.
So how did that manifest? What did that look like?
Well, the result of that is that when you are educated in a school today, the teacher doesn't have the understanding that actually what I have here is a group of spirits with bodies that need educating. Or you go to the doctor and you say, I keep getting migraines. Well, he says, well, that's just purely something chemical.
It's a symptom. They don't find the whole. They don't treat the whole
They're
body.
not dealing with you holistically. And the ripple effect of that lack of understanding, of that incomplete picture of a human being, it's subtle, but it's tremendously damaging.
Now, you're a really interesting person. Now, I don't profess to know a great deal about Scientology, I must be honest, but you're a Scientologist as well as a Christian, is that right? So how does that work? Or does it work? Because
it's a good question.
Tell me.
Well, the simplest way to understand Christianity is to read a Bible. And I would suggest that you can buy a decent Bible in most bookstores, and if you read it, and then if you want help understanding it, well, then maybe you can find a good priest that can help you out with that. The best way to understand Scientology is to buy the basic books on Scientology and read that subject. So most people that ask that question have either never read the Bible properly, or they've never studied Scientology.
I've read the Bible, but I haven't studied Scientology, I have to say.
Okay, so you qualify as and that's most people.
Yeah.
So the best way for somebody to really understand that is to truly study both subjects. And what I would suggest, as I say, if you want to understand Christianity, read the Bible. If you want to, there's a website, Scientology.tv, which is now very good, where you can watch videos on the subject, or you can go to their website, or you can buy most of the books in a library. However, that doesn't really solve it for your audience today. And I would make the point that please don't take me as an official spokesperson for Scientology. I was living in Hollywood, and I happened to notice that they had a huge amount of real estate there. A number of buildings up and down Hollywood Boulevard. If you've ever been to Hollywood, you will have seen them. You literally can't avoid them. Whereas in this country, you might see a Church of Scientology once in a blue moon. There's one in London, 2 in London, I think. But they're not that common. But if you're living in Hollywood, you literally can't avoid it. It's like, and big billboards and so on and so forth. So I just walked in there one day, and I wanted to know, what was it? And to answer your question, Christianity it's like, a similar question would be, could you be a Christian and use a mobile telephone?
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay.
They're not competitive.
No.
Right? Could you be a better Christian with a mobile telephone?
Possibly.
Possibly. If you used it for good.
Yes, exactly.
If you used it for bad,
then no.
Then no. So that's about as close of an accurate thing. It just does completely different things.
Okay, yeah.
It addresses subjects that are not touched on in the Bible, other than extremely indirectly. And it answers questions that people have about themselves that simply are not addressed anywhere else. And I found that very interesting.
Interesting. I mean, moving more in a sort of more up-to-date way. Now, I've been following you on Twitter, and at first, I mean, you were quite supportive of Donald Trump and whatever he was doing. What changed for you? I mean, obviously, you were very supportive of him, I believe. Did he come here?
No, he didn't come here, but I was the, I think, third person to be introduced to him after he was elected in
Because it was a very different picture then, wasn't it? He seemed very different.
The thing was, he was different.
Yes.
And, there's all sorts of theories as to why he's changed. I have my own, but it's a little esoteric. In 2015, when he came down the escalator, we were in a world where Hillary Clinton would have taken us to war with Russia.
Absolutely.
And I could see that, and I could extrapolate that. So I did whatever I could, and we did a lot, to help him get elected. And after he got elected, his son actually called me, Eric called me a few days after he was elected, and he said, "John, we saw everything you did. Thank you, thank you, thank you."
Yes.
I didn't do it. I didn't work for the campaign. I did it off my own dollar. I did it off my own expenses. Nobody paid me. I just communicated what I saw, and because I am in touch with a lot of opinion formers and opinion leaders, and a lot of people do seem to, for whatever reason, like to read what I write, it affected the base. And also, when he came down the escalator, because I knew he would win, because I have this little algorithm that I use to predict outcomes, I took the book at William Hill at 33-1. And I
That's a very good bet.
Well, I put 36 bets on. I was a bit greedy. But anyway,
done.
William Hill called me up and they said, "You do realise you're about to lose a lot of money?" I said, "No, you're going to lose a lot of money." And they said, "Well, why do you say that?" And anyway, they said, "Well, we want to go public with the story of the bet," because they saw that, sort of Englishman. Anyway.
So that gained a lot of traction.
God. Next thing I knew, the New York Post is calling me up. They said, "We see you back Donald Trump." And I said, "Are you going to be nice?" They said, "Yes, we're going to be nice." Anyway, next thing I knew is the headline of the New York Post: "Donald Trump's biggest fan is a Scientologist that lives in a castle."
Oh, my goodness.
And I mean, it was absolutely hilarious. And I then hired the ex-editor of the News of the World, who was sort of poacher turned gamekeeper, to do my sort of public relations,
Yeah.
whatever. We reached a lot of people. I did a lot of radio shows, and it was really interesting. And throughout his first term, we continued to help him a lot. We gave him a lot of ideas. And then after he was elected, I was introduced to Charlie Kirk, and a friend of mine, one of his first donors, connected us and said, listen, I think you could do for Charlie what you did for Trump.
Really?
And so we helped Charlie tremendously.
And you became a real personal friend of Charlie's, didn't you?
We were super close.
Yeah.
I mean, we texted, sometimes we would text 2 or 3 times a day.
Amazing.
But we stayed in touch. I mean, I followed every tweet he put out. We were very, very close. Well, I introduced him to the UK. And because I got 1 or 2 friends in America, I introduced him to some of his directly and indirectly, to some of his largest donors in America.
And he and Candice Owens came.
Yeah, they both came over.
Yes.
In fact, Candice, it's another minute. Remember earlier I was saying the magic of coincidence.
Magic.
So I'm not against coincidence.
No.
We're sitting downstairs, and funnily enough, we've seen downstairs at the RAC Club, and we were talking about actually the evolution of psychiatry and how this had affected the world. And she said, well, that's all very interesting. It was all quite new stuff for her then. And we were walking upstairs. I said, have you been to London before? But Charlie hasn't, but I've been to London before. She said, I've always had the idea that, I might marry an Englishman. She said, well, do you know anybody?
You're a matchmaker.
I can't remember the exact. I don't know whether she said that. I said, well, Candice, don't look at me because I'm the worst matchmaker in history. I always get it wrong. Anyway, by complete chance, Lord Farmer's son had called me up, a few, days before, and he said, I hear you were doing this thing. My friend can't come, but he's got tickets. Could I come? I said, of course, George, come along. And he turns up, and he's in the sort of meet and greet line. I said, George, I don't think you met Candice. They look at each other, and I said, hang on. Well, it was literally, you hear about love at first sight.
Oh.
It was obvious. And then the next night, we all had dinner together. And it was a dinner that had been organised by Joseph Paul Watson, who was very active in those days. And it was just a small dinner, and they talked all night. And then Charlie had sort of said to me, well, John, do you want to be involved in the running of Turning Point over here? Because we'd done this launch for Charlie. I said, listen, I'll keep helping you, but I think it's a young man's thing. Let's get, somebody that's sort of just come from university or whatever. So then he's talking with George, and he said, well, what do you think about George to head up Turning Point UK? I said, sounds great to me, Charlie. Let's go for it. Why not? And so that happened. And then next thing I knew, George had proposed. Listen, they are the most fantastic couple. They've now got 4 beautiful children. And by the way, it was a total coincidence. There's all sorts of theories that somehow this was some type of sort of arranged situation. It absolutely was not. I had no idea. I'd actually never met George before. It just was it was a phone contact prior to that point.
Lovely.
So it was a very genuine thing, and but we do see each other a bit now, and they're family friends, I would say.
Join me, Sandi Adams, live at Goffinland, Exeter on the 14th of May, discussing 2030 and beyond, hosted by Emma Donwell, and music from Trevor John. So going back to Charlie, you obviously were close. Did you see him before he died? What kind of conversations were you having? I mean, because I think he'd realised some stuff just before he died, didn't he? And you did mention this. I think I've read it in some of the things that you've written. So if you could expand on that and what Charlie was going through.
Well, I've got to be obviously,
careful.
Not careful. I just want to be sensitive because people are still very, very raw.
Of course.
And the subjects that he mentioned to me are very, very sensitive, and it's so easy for them to be
manipulated.
Misinterpreted. Yeah. But I did have dinner with him in London in May of 2025. And if you remember, he was coming over to speak at Oxford. And the dinner at Oxford, it was a dinner and then he was speaking, and he was going to Cambridge as well. So he called me, and I had wanted to see him because there were a number of things going on in the world at that time, which I wanted to be able to talk with him about privately. And what was striking is that it was clear that he had completely changed his position on supporting the actions of the Israeli government. And this is interesting to me because, of course, I had been to Israel with Charlie in 2019, in March 2019.
Yes.
He'd been doing a tour of England, which we'd arranged. And in March of that year, I suppose going along on the tour, I'd basically taken my family skiing, to be absolutely honest. Because I said, well, you go do the tour. I'm going to go and do my annual skiing holiday. Yeah. And he calls me up in Switzerland. He said, John, I really want you to meet Erica. Would you come to Israel after the tour? We're going to Israel. That's our next stop. And he'd been invited out there to, and I said, well, I can come out. I said, the only slight problem is I'm in Switzerland. I've only got sort of Austrian-style clothing. Well, actually, the jacket's similar to this, fun enough. I said, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's the correct dress code for, Jerusalem. And I said, number one, it's going to be too hot. And he said, well, just do try and come, John. So we flew out and we toured. We went to Hebron together. We walked the path of Christ. We actually stood where Christ first exercised his free speech.
I saw that on Twitter.
Did you see that?
It. Yeah, it was absolutely
It's the most beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And actually, it's amazing because I don't think the media has really picked up on that clip. It was the most beautiful thing. And at that time, both he and Erica were very, very supportive of everything that Israel was doing.
Yes.
And funnily enough, we had a conversation. The reason I wanted to go to Israel is I had the idea that we should make, in order to get the Abraham Accords through, that the sovereignty of the Golan Heights should be acknowledged. So I arrived in Jerusalem, sat at dinner with him. I said, Charlie, I've got this wild idea. Just announce the fact that the Golan Heights are sovereign, because it'll remove that negotiation block off the table, and then the rest of the accords will go through. It was a mechanical negotiation point.
Exactly.
And I said, Trump will probably have the courage to just do that. So he said, well, it's funny, I'm going to the Golan Heights tomorrow with the head of the IDF. I will call President Trump from the Golan Heights. So he puts in a call, he gets hold of Jared Kushner. He comes back later that night, and he tells me, because I didn't go with him to the Golan. And we're sitting there, and he says, well, I called Jared, and I said to Jared, listen, we need to make the Golan Heights sovereign. He said, well, that's marvellous. He said, but would you mind telling President Trump? I'll walk the phone through. So he walks the phone through to the Oval Office. So this is a story Charlie told me. And he said, Mr. President, I think we need to make the Golan Heights sovereign. He goes to the President, well, that's a very interesting idea. So I'm going to speak to a group of Jewish leaders or whatever. Anyway, a few days later, literally 2-3 days later, I remember we'd just left Israel. Trump texts out, the Golan Heights are sovereign. And it had come, it had totally come as a result of sort of Charlie and I sort of brainstorming, because what Charlie and I worked on primarily, obviously I did introduce him to some major donor money, but that wasn't my main interest with him.
No.
My main interest is peacemaking and creating unity.
Brilliant.
And
That's what we need.
sort of backlines. You know, I believe that you have to be willing to talk to people that you hate. You have to.
Oh,
you know,
absolutely.
The problem.
Dialogue is everything.
Even today,
yes.
what have we got going on? Iran has dropped out, cut all the communications. Trump is, communicating completely insanely on X. But if you want to make peace, I have to. Let's say you and I have had a horrendous row, right? Well, if we start off the conversation with, well, you did this, and then you say, well, you did this, and you did this. No, I have to find something about you to admire.
Exactly. Yeah.
I have to. And so my whole life, I suppose, going back to Hollywood, when I was in Hollywood, I interviewed the man whose father had kept the back lines open between Khrushchev and Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And but for that one guy, he was an Irish man called O'Donnell. And I knew his son very well, and then he introduced me to the father. And but for this one guy, this planet would be a billiard ball.
Really?
Oh no, that was going to go nuclear.
Really? Gosh.
And this one guy, and all the people around Kennedy were saying, don't keep the lines open, we've cut all communication. And this one guy, they made a film about it actually, I forget what it's called, but Kevin Costner played the guy.
Oh, right.
And it was produced by the guy's son. The film was produced by him in Hollywood. And it's a great story. But for this one guy, and as a result of that interview, as a result of really hearing the story from the horse's mouth and hearing how that had affected the world, I have never forgotten the importance of a backline and the importance of what one can do with a backline. And this is true in business as well, of course, you know, but it's particularly true in geopolitics. And so I have taken the time to study other cultures, you know. For instance, I am a Scientologist and I'm a Christian, but funny enough, I've also studied the Quran.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and most people who criticize Islam haven't taken the time
Haven't read the Quran.
to do that.
Yeah.
Well, is that entirely an educated view? I don't think so.
No, exactly.
Do you see my point? So
Trump then sounded a very reasonable person. You could, you know, obviously Charlie Kirk could have dialogue with him, and the sovereignty of the Golan Heights happened. So what happened? What's gone so horribly wrong?
I don't know what's happened.
No,
to be absolutely honest,
because we're all very confused, aren't we? Because I know a lot of people that were really pro-Trump and now are going.
I think he's lost about 80% of his base.
I mean, what's happened? We don't know.
Well, there's all sorts of theories. I think that it's observable there's been a change.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt. It's very, very tricky. I think it's spiritual.
Okay.
I think it's spiritual. I think that something happened. But we are seeing this a lot with leaders. I mean, a number of people have been elected, and you think they're going down one road, and a certain person here, as I recall, was elected on a chant of education, education, education. And then he ended up being shoulder to shoulder and bombing the living daylights out of several countries.
Yeah.
So these changes happen. We saw it during COVID. I think there was a certain prime minister that somebody had never bought him a hairbrush. And I forget his name.
Poor old Boris.
Oh, that's his name. Yeah, that's right. But, you know, he went into hospital and he changed.
Well, exactly.
Something happened.
Something happened to him.
Something happened.
You know, before then he was, you know, he was saying, you know, don't worry, this is nothing to worry about. And then he apparently got COVID, went in, came out a completely different person.
And he changed. He went in against lockdown and against mandatory vaccines.
Yeah.
And he came out and something had changed. And the question, obviously the interesting question is, do they know what's been done to them? Or do they not know? And these are subjects that are probably a longer conversation now. But to go back, I needed to finish the point. When I saw Charlie in London, he had completely shifted his position. You know, he'd gone from being more or less 99.9% all in for whatever the Israeli government said was a good idea. And he now, I think it probably, in his case, it was because he was a new father.
Right.
And he loved his children tremendously. He was really enjoying being a dad. And he was certainly not supporting. Now, publicly, obviously, he was still, when he went up to Oxford, you know, he defended Israel's position. And when he went to Cambridge, actually, there was a young boy at Cambridge, I don't know if you saw, he was a little redhead boy who did give him a bit of a pummeling at Cambridge. And he was quite affected by that.
Right.
That was the night before he went to Oxford.
Oh, right.
And he philosophically, I mean, he landed punches on Charlie, which is quite rare for Charlie. And it impinged upon him. But you had a very interesting situation where privately, he was completely out. He was not supporting. He found what had occurred in Gaza to be
Yes.
disgraceful, and he certainly didn't condone it. He was asking questions. And, that's why I think what Candace Owens is doing now is so valuable.
She's amazing.
She's amazing.
I follow
She is
her.
amazing.
She's doing some really good work. And, I think we're probably drawing almost to a close here. And it's been an absolute joy speaking to you about all of this. And it's really good to get to know John Mappin. I mean, you're doing such an incredible job running this place and getting involved in...
Well, you met my wife. She does all that.
Really, she's amazing.
She's brilliant.
She's absolutely amazing.
No, she's highly competent.
Yeah, she's wonderful. I mean, obviously we're at this pinch point at the moment where we're almost waiting for something to happen in order to galvanise people into really understanding what's going on in the world, because people are so, I think, shocked with things and overwhelmed and almost immobilised by the news. What could actually help them to understand what's going on, and how do we give people something to not hope, because I don't like the word hope, but some kind of feeling that all is not lost in this country right now, because it does feel that way. And I don't like to feel like that. I never want to give up on this country. I love it. It's where I was born, and I love the people of this country, and I love the history and everything. And there's so much to save here, so much to hang on to and preserve. So what would you say to the people of this country?
I think you just got to be true to your own knowingness and true to your own inner conscience. The word conscience is most interesting. It actually, your conscience is the deepest well of knowledge that you have. And it's an interesting thing, a conscience. Whenever you transgress, I don't know about you,
Yes.
you know instantly, don't you?
It's like Jiminy Cricket.
It's like
Do you
Jiminy
remember?
Cricket,
He's on the show.
And I think we have to pay attention to our own
Yeah,
consciences.
yeah.
I think I will never tell people to sort of get too proactive, because I think each of us does what we can.
Yeah.
But if you see an opportunity of communicating about something safely, then do so. Get onto the playing field. Open an X account. X is a bit of a battleground. It's certainly not Facebook.
It's brilliant, though. All the politicians are on X. That's why I
Well, that's
follow
where
it.
narrative is being shaped.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, get yourself onto X. I would say get yourself, work out for yourself who you feel is doing, who's telling you the truth. And explore non-traditional platforms. If you switch on your TV and you flick through the channels and every single person is saying exactly the same thing, and almost you feel that you can say it before it's even come out of their mouth, you know that you're probably looking at some type of curated narrative. But life itself is not curated. Life is organic. And so I think really just be true to yourself and be true to your... I don't really like to tell anybody to follow any one thing in particular.
No.
I wouldn't even tell somebody, be a Christian or study Scientology or study Islam, or each of these things have merit. You yourself, have to decide.
Find your way, yes.
And all the great archetypes, you have this journey that one is on. And don't ignore signs. Don't ignore that sort of anomaly that just crops up in your life. And you go, hang on, this is the third person today that's talked about this. Maybe I should sort of look into that or something. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely.
So, but there we go.
And do you think politics needs to change? Because it's not working, is it?
I think it is changing.
It is changing. So, I feel that there needs to be more of a moral compass. We need to have ethical politicians that do actually have morals. I don't know how we do that, but I mean, how do you think it's changing now, and who do you think is changing it, and what are they doing that is
well,
so
in this
good?
country, of course, I think the most interesting emergence in the last 6 months, funnily enough, is Rupert Lowe. I think he's very interesting.
100%.
And I'm a little biased because he's a personal friend of mine, and we're close in that sense. But obviously, politics shouldn't be you don't vote for somebody because they're your mate.
No.
You vote for them because you think that they're going to do the job and that their policy is sound. His rise is miraculous. I've not seen anything like this for, actually since Trump came down the escalator. I've not seen a people galvanized, specifically at the grassroots. And so I favour what he's doing to the degree that I continue to agree with what he's doing. I mean, I'm not somebody that joins myself at the hip to anybody.
No.
I did support Trump for a considerable period of time. Now,
And Farage to a degree, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Nigel, and I don't have a bad word to say about Nigel. I think Nigel is a wonderful fellow. We've worked together. We've been family friends for a very long time. And, obviously he has done a tremendous service to this country. But freedom movements evolve, and there is a very powerful freedom movement evolving in this country. Things are happening very, very fast indeed. It is affected tremendously by what's going on worldwide. We are going to witness things. One of the things I will say is in the next 2 years, we are going to witness things that neither you nor I could possibly imagine that we would witness in our lifetime.
Wow.
We are going to see things.
Statement.
We are going to see things. There is emerging data. There is emerging information that is making certain factors so obvious. And the general public is just beginning to get a sniff of it. And it will all become very, very clear in the next 2 years. And these will be seismic, tectonic shifts.
But that will be a good thing. That will shift.
Yes, it's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah, I feel that. Yeah.
Even the fact that Trump is exposing himself, and really, I got into terrible. I was criticised the other day because I compared him to the emperor with no clothes, and but of course, I'm afraid he's stripped himself stark naked.
He has.
And it's a shame. Yeah. It's a shame. I really, really, really had tremendous, tremendous hopes for what he could do.
So many did. He's disappointed so many. Yes.
Yeah, he has.
Now, I could talk to you forever, but I'm afraid we will have to wrap up soon. But
okay, good.
You have this book.
Well, I haven't written it.
You haven't written it.
No. I'm not the author. The author is Mike Fairclough.
But it's about you.
It is. It's biographical, and funnily enough, Mike Fairclough is that teacher that refused to vaccinate children in his school, and he was fired, and the government fired him. He was one of the one teachers. He's an amazing writer. And funnily enough, we hosted an event up at the Carlton Club, and I flew in all of the people that invented mRNA and explained to all the politicians. They all knew that this thing was going to kill people. And because we explained it to them at a private event at the Carlton Club.
Yes.
And that's where I met Mike. And then we stayed friends. And he said to me, John, could I do this book? And I said, well, I've never allowed it before. But I thought, you know what? Why not? And I completely opened up to him. And there's all sorts of things in there. There's all sorts of anecdotes about how Trump and I met, and how, Charlie Kirk and I initially got going, and why, what we've done to sort of back up Candace, and all sorts of little anecdotes. It is. I mean, I was. Listen, it's not everywhere.
Where can we find it? Where can we?
Well, it's just been launched in America.
Okay.
And I'm very proud because Tucker's given me a quote for it, and Candace has. So it's the only book, not on this copy because that's the English copy, but on the American copy, it's the only book that's been endorsed by Tucker and Candace.
That's quite,
which is great.
Quite an achievement, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's great.
Well done.
Yeah. Well, it's
Brilliant.
not, as I say, Mike wrote it, but it's great. Thank you. But you can find it on Amazon.
We'll on Amazon. So we'll all be getting a copy of this,
I'll
I
give you a
think.
copy. I'll give you a signed copy.
Thank
There
you
go.
very much. Will you sign it for me?
I will sign
Thank
it,
you.
yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much, John Mappin. It's been an absolute joy speaking to you. You're just an absolutely wonderful guest. Thank you so much.
You're super welcome. Thanks so much.
Bless you.
Thank you.